Welcome, seeker of secrets. You have stepped into a realm where forgotten tales whisper and forbidden truths wait to be uncovered. Listen closely, for once you learn these secrets, there is no turning back. The question is, are you ready? The bracelet wasn't supposed to be found. That much was clear from the moment Mara touched it. The old estate loomed around her, skeletal remains of what had once been a grand mansion now devoured by time. Ivy strangled the cracked stone walls, and the air reeked of mildew and damp rot. The place wasn't just abandoned, it had been forgotten, swallowed by nature and the whispers of those who knew better than to step foot on cursed ground. For years, the locals spoke in hushed tones about this land, about the mansion that had once stood here, about the secrets it had swallowed whole. No one dared venture near. Some said the house had burned in an act of divine justice. Others said something darker had happened, that the house had consumed itself, brick by brick, as if trying to erase what had once lurked within. Mara didn't believe in curses. She didn't believe in anything anymore, not in fate, not in luck, and certainly not in treasure. She had come here out of desperation, clinging to a half-remembered story her grandmother had told her as a child. A story of something hidden, something lost, something waiting. She had expected a rusted trinket, a broken locket, some meaningless heirloom buried in the ruins. Yet there it was. She hadn't even been searching long. One careless step sent her tumbling into the mansion's crumbling foundation, her body slamming against the cold earth. Pain flared through her knees and palms, the taste of blood sharp in her mouth. She cursed under her breath, shaking off the sting, when something beneath the rubble caught the light, a faint, unnatural glimmer against the dull gray of broken stone. Mara's breath hitched. She crouched, ignoring the ache in her joints, and brushed away the dirt with trembling fingers. Beneath the dust and decay, the crimson jewel gleamed, so deep in color it looked like a droplet of frozen blood. The stone pulsed faintly, catching the last dying slivers of sunlight that filtered through the overgrown canopy above. Wanted to be seen. It was set in gold, wrapped in intricate vines that seemed too perfect, as though they had grown naturally around the jewel rather than being forged by human hands. The metal was pristine, untouched by time, the patterns so delicate they looked almost alive in the shifting shadows. Mara hesitated. Her heartbeat hammered in her throat. The bracelet looked ancient, priceless, wrong. And yet, as she reached for it, an unmistakable warmth spread through her fingers. A pulse, steady and deliberate like a heartbeat. It recognized her. A shiver crawled down her spine. She should leave it. She should walk away. But Mara had spent years drowning in the wreckage of her own life. If there was the slightest chance this bracelet could change things, she had to take it. Her fingers traced the delicate golden vines, following the endless twists and curves. It was mesmerizing, hypnotic. She had expected some old trinket, something cheap and broken. Instead, she held power in her hands. Hope, a cruel, distant thing she had buried long ago, stirred inside her. Maybe this was it, the sign she had been waiting for. Maybe this was her second chance. Before she could stop herself, she slipped the bracelet onto her wrist. It fit perfectly. The air shifted. The warmth against her skin deepened, a slow, creeping heat that spread up her arm, through her chest, and into her bones. Her breath hitched. The ruins blurred. The world around her folded in on itself, shadows bleeding into each other, twisting, shifting. And then she wasn't there anymore. Mara stood beneath golden light. Blinding, intoxicating. A stage stretched before her, massive, endless. The faces in the audience blurred together. A sea of indistinct shapes, voices rising in a deafening chant. They called her name, worshipped her. The applause thundered through her skull, vibrating deep in her bones. They loved her. It was the dream she had never spoken aloud, the dream she had abandoned long ago. She felt it all, the exhilaration, the power, the certainty that this was where she belonged. It was real. And then, just as suddenly, it was gone. The ruins of the estate snapped back into focus, cold and lifeless. But the weight of the moment remained. Mara stumbled, her breath ragged, her pulse racing. The jewel in the bracelet pulsed against her wrist, soft, slow, like it was breathing. The world felt different now. The air heavier. The shadows at the edges of her vision wrong. The bracelet clung to her skin, unyielding, a silent presence that made itself known. It owned her now. Mara exhaled, unsteady, but the flicker of hope inside her burned brighter. For the first time in years, she let herself believe. She didn't know it yet, but the warmth pressing into her wrist wasn't comfort. It was hunger. And Mara hadn't always been this broken. Once, she had been a rising star, a literary phenomenon. Her debut novel, Echoes of Fire, had been hailed as a masterpiece, an unflinching, visceral look at the darkness lurking beneath ordinary lives. Critics called her the next great voice, whispered about awards, and compared her to literary legends. Readers devoured her words. Her name mattered. She was invited to exclusive literary panels, her presence sought after at festivals where aspiring authors hung on her every word. Magazines plastered her face on glossy pages next to headlines like, "Mara Kingsley, the woman who writes what we're afraid to say." But greatness is fickle. The pressure to outdo herself had been relentless, suffocating. Her second novel, Rushed, Strained, had been met with lukewarm reviews. Not bad but not brilliant. The magic was missing and the critics could smell it. Her third novel fared worse. The world that had once lifted her up now shrugged her off like a passing trend. The glowing profiles dried up. The once reverent critics sharpened their words, their reviews merciless. Predictable. Lacks the raw power of her debut. Another fallen literary darling. Rejection letters piled up. Publishers stopped returning her calls. Her agent, once her biggest champion, suggested in a voice thick with regret that she might need to explore other avenues. Mara stopped answering her phone. Then, slowly, the phone stopped ringing altogether. Her name, once spoken with admiration, faded. Now, at 36, she lived in a one-bedroom tomb of an apartment, thick with the scent of stale coffee and forgotten ambition. Rejection letters and unpaid bills wallpapered the walls. Her once prized typewriter sat like a corpse on her cluttered desk, surrounded by half-filled notebooks littered with unfinished ideas, dead stories. She still tried to write. Every day she sat in front of that machine, willing the words to come. But they never did. They felt lifeless, hollow, as if the part of her that had once breathed fire into them had long since burned out. Her personal life had fared no better. Her ex-boyfriend, one of the few people who had still seen her when the world stopped looking, had walked out 6 months ago, calling her obsessed with the past. Bitter, neglected, toxic. He took half the furniture. He took all her dignity. Since then, the apartment had felt like a crypt, a place where time didn't move, where shadows clung to the corners like something alive. She hardly left. Then, in a moment of desperation, a faint childhood memory surfaced. A story her grandmother had once told her, whispered like a secret. There's something precious out there, something waiting to be found. It was a fairy tale, a bedtime tale spun from nothing, but Mara was drowning, and even the thinnest thread of hope felt like a lifeline. So she left her apartment, and she found the estate. The mansion was nothing but a rotting skeleton of its former self. A once grand Victorian, now overrun with ivy and crawling with decay. The air was thick, damp with mildew, and every step she took on the crumbling floors felt like stepping over something's grave. Darkness filled every broken room, the kind that swallowed light whole. She wasn't expecting to find anything. She told herself she was just indulging in nostalgia, an excuse to leave her apartment, to breathe air that wasn't poisoned by regret. Then she stumbled over the bracelet. It was buried beneath a pile of rubble in what must have once been a parlor. A fractured window cast thin slashes of moonlight into the dust-heavy air, and one of those beams caught something gleaming, something waiting. Mara knelt, her breath hitching as she brushed the dirt away. The crimson jewel pulsed faintly beneath the dust, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. Deep, rich, and red as blood. The gold wrapped around it in an intricate web of twisting vines, each detail flawless, untouched by time. It was impossibly pristine, as though it had never been buried at all. Her fingers trembled as she reached for it. The moment she touched the metal, warmth spread through her fingers. It felt alive. She should have left it. She should have walked away. Instead, she slipped it onto her wrist. It fit perfectly. At first, she chalked the feeling up to exhaustion, to adrenaline, to her own pathetic need to believe in something again. But as the hours passed, something changed. She went home, sat at her desk, and for the first time in years, the words came. They poured out of her, raw and hungry, filling the pages like they had been waiting for release. The hesitation, the self-doubt, the blank, endless purgatory of nothingness, it was all gone. She wasn't just writing. She was creating. She barely noticed the subtle shifts, the gray streaks weaving through her sandy blonde hair, the faint ache creeping through her bones, the shadows on the walls that seemed to linger just a second too long. She didn't care. By dawn, she had 10,000 words. She stared at the pages, her amber eyes wide, her fingers shaking. This was it, her second chance. The bracelet's jewel glowed faintly in the soft morning light, almost as if it knew, as if it shared in her triumph. A whisper stirred in the back of her mind, quiet but insistent. A warning. Mara ignored it. Desperation had taught her not to listen to warnings. Instead, she turned back to the pages, her masterpiece, and dove back into the fire. She was alive again, and she wasn't letting go. Mara's newfound inspiration was a ravenous thing. Over the next week, she did nothing but write. She barely ate, barely slept. The words poured out of her, unstoppable, as though they had been waiting for her all along. Each time she sat at her desk, the stories were already there, fully formed, detailed, visceral. She wasn't thinking. She wasn't planning. The words simply appeared, commanding her to capture them. She wrote with a hunger she hadn't felt since her 20s. Days blurred together, vanishing in a haze of ink and keystrokes. Mara lost track of time, of the outside world, of her own body. Her fingers ached, but she never paused. Her reflection in the apartment window was a blur, a ghost of a woman chained to her desk. Even the tiniest details, the scent of rain on pavement, the distant hum of a flickering street lamp, the feeling of being watched from just outside a doorway, came too easily. The scenes dripped with life, each one more vivid than the last. It was magic, and for the first time in years, Mara didn't question it. She didn't dare. On a whim, she sent the completed manuscript to her old agent. She expected silence. Or worse, another rejection, a polite reminder that she no longer mattered. But the response was almost instantaneous. Her phone rang that same evening. The number on the screen froze her. Her agent. Mara hesitated. Her heart raced. By the time she answered, her voice felt like it belonged to someone else. "Mara, this is brilliant." The word struck like a lightning bolt. "I can't believe you've been sitting on this. Let's talk." The agent's excitement reignited a spark that had been long dead. The story wasn't just good. It was the best thing she had ever written. Momentum built overnight. Her agent spoke of deals, of opportunities Mara hadn't dared dream of in years. Within days, the buzz had begun to spread. Publishers who had once ghosted her were suddenly clamoring to talk. By the end of the month, she had a new book deal. An advance large enough to erase her debts, to rewrite her life. Her name, once abandoned to the bargain bins, now flooded the industry. She was on magazine covers again. Her face, smiling, triumphant, beneath headlines that glowed with redemption. The comeback queen. Mara Kingsley's redemption arc. Everything she had lost, her success, her relevance, her place in the world, had been returned to her. It felt surreal. Like waking up from a nightmare, only to find that the nightmare had never been real at all. But as her fame soared, so did the unease. It started small. A headache here. A shiver that crawled down her spine like cold fingers. She told herself it was stress. The interviews, the deadlines, the return to a life she had once thought gone forever. But soon, the changes became impossible to ignore. Her hair thinned at the edges. The streaks of premature gray she had barely noticed before spread like wildfire. Her reflection in the mirror looked off, a woman she no longer recognized. Her skin dulled. Her once bright amber eyes dimmed, as though something inside her was slowly being drained. And then came the whispers. At first, she thought it was the city, creaking pipes, the murmur of wind against her old apartment walls. But the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Soft, rasping voices that slithered through the darkness, curling into the quiet spaces of her mind. Give it back. It's not yours. Return it, before it takes everything. She woke up gasping. Sitting upright in bed, chest heaving, ears straining for the voices that vanished the second she turned on the light. But the silence felt wrong. It felt like something was still there, watching. The whispers came from the bracelet. It never left her wrist now. No matter how many times she tried to remove it, the clasp wouldn't budge. It clung to her like a leech, feeding, pulsing faintly against her skin with that same unsettling warmth. Her euphoria turned to dread. The words still came, but now they came at a cost. Every writing session became a battle. Each time she put pen to paper, something slipped into her mind, a crimson mist at the edges of her vision, creeping in like rot. She saw things, flashes of faces she didn't recognize, hollow eyes, mouths moving in silent screams. They were not hers to remember, and they were getting closer. At first, they only lived in her mind. But soon, she saw them in the corners of her apartment. Shadowy figures with glowing red eyes, standing motionless in the dark. Watching. Waiting. Every time she finished a new chapter, her body collapsed. Drained. Shaking. As if the words were being ripped out of her. And then Gareth appeared. He showed up at one of her book signings. Not a fan. Not a journalist. Just a quiet, unassuming man in his late 30s, standing near the back of the crowd. He had sharp features. A chiseled jawline. Storm gray eyes that felt like they saw too much. He didn't ask for an autograph. He didn't even speak. Instead, he simply handed her a note. Mara frowned, unfolding it beneath the table. "The bracelet you're wearing is cursed. We need to talk before it's too late." Her stomach flipped. Her pulse spiked. Mara's head shot up, but Gareth was already leaving. Weaving through the crowd, vanishing into the sea of faces. Her breath quickened. She looked around frantically, her hands gripping the note so tightly the paper crumpled in her fists. Who was he? How did he know about the bracelet? A cold, creeping dread settled in her gut. She needed to find him. That night she dreamed of him. She stood in the void. The same shadowed abyss that haunted her visions, thick with crimson mist. Gareth was there, standing just outside the glow of the bracelet's jewel. He watched her, calm but unwavering. His voice low and steady. "I know what that thing is doing to you." Mara stepped closer, her breath fogging in the cold, endless dark. "Who are you?" she demanded. "I'm someone who knows how to stop it." His gray eyes locked onto hers. Unblinking, unrelenting. Mara jerked awake, heart pounding, chest tight. She looked down at her wrist. The bracelet pulsed against her skin, soft, slow, almost mocking. Mara shuddered. For the first time since putting it on, she felt something she hadn't let herself feel before. Fear. Mara sat in the suffocating dimness of her apartment, the crumpled note trembling in her hands. The words on the paper were simple, yet they burned against her skin. "The bracelet you're wearing is cursed. We need to talk before it's too late." The bracelet's crimson jewel pulsed, a faint, mocking glow. The whispers had grown louder since the encounter at the signing. They no longer hovered at the edges of her mind. They had infested it, slithering through her thoughts, her walls, her very bones. "Don't listen to him. He lies. You need us." The voices twisted through her skull, insidious and cloying. She clutched her temples, her breath ragged. She had to meet him. She had to know the truth. The meeting. The cafe was quiet, too quiet. Tucked into a sleepy street Mara had never noticed before, its existence felt wrong, as if it had simply appeared for this moment alone. She hesitated by the entrance. Through the window, she spotted Gareth in the farthest booth, his rigid posture exuding unease. His storm gray eyes locked onto her the moment she stepped inside, watching her with an intensity that sent a cold shiver up her spine. There was no warmth in his expression, no pleasantries. She slid into the booth, her heart hammering. Gareth didn't waste time. His gaze flicked to her wrist. "Do you know what that thing is?" Mara swallowed, glancing at the glowing band. "It's just an old heirloom," she lied, her voice weak. She didn't believe the words. Neither did he. Gareth leaned in, voice low and urgent. "That heirloom has been passed down for centuries. Every person who's worn it has paid a price. It feeds on your soul, your essence, until there's nothing left. The fame, the success, it's all a distraction. You felt it, haven't you? The drain, the whispers, the visions. It's consuming you." Mara's fingers clenched around her coffee cup, her hands trembling. "How do you know all this?" she whispered. Gareth's jaw tightened. "Because it destroyed my family." His voice was eerily calm, but his eyes, his haunted, grief-ridden eyes, told a different story. "My mother wore it. She thought she could handle it too. By the time she realized what it was doing to her, it was too late. She withered away, became something that wasn't her anymore." His fingers curled into fists on the table. "And the worst part?" His voice dropped to a hollow whisper. "She passed it to me, hoping it would save her." Mara reeled. Her body screamed at her to run, to escape, but she couldn't move. She had felt the bracelet's pull. The euphoria. The power. The hunger. "He's lying. He doesn't understand. You belong to us now." Mara shuddered, pressing her palm against the cool tabletop. "Why didn't you destroy it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Gareth exhaled sharply. You think I haven't tried? He leaned back, his shoulders sagging under the weight of a battle already lost. That thing doesn't let go. It clings to the desperate, the broken, the ones who think they can beat it, but it always wins. A deep, primal cold seeped into Mara's bones. The cafe felt smaller now, the air thinner, as if the walls were closing in. So what am I supposed to do? She rasped. Just let it take me? Gareth's eyes bore into her. No. The word landed like a sharp crack in the silence. There's one way to break it, but it's not easy. The bracelet binds itself to your deepest pain. If you confront that, truly confront it, it loses its power. Mara's breath caught. Her failures, her heartbreak, the unbearable shame that had driven her into isolation. The bracelet had fed on those things, lured her in with the promise of undoing them. But if she faced them, if she ripped open the wounds she had buried deep, could she truly break free? What if I can't do it? She whispered. Gareth's gaze softened. You can. But it will hurt like hell. At night, back in her apartment, Mara stood before the mirror. Her gaunt face stared back at her. Hollow eyes, sunken cheeks, a stranger. The bracelet burned against her wrist, the jewel pulsing, the whispers screaming now. Stop. You need us. You'll be nothing without us. Tears blurred her vision. Mara ripped the bracelet off and threw it to the floor. The jewel flared, a crimson explosion of light. The shadows rose. They spilled from the bracelet, humanoid figures of swirling black smoke, their glowing red eyes locking onto her. They circled her like vultures, whispering in voices that crawled beneath her skin. You're nothing without us. You'll fall back into obscurity. You'll die forgotten. Mara's breath hitched. Her entire body shook. But deep inside, a different voice, the voice she had spent years silencing, rose above the fear. It whispered, you were something before this. You were something without them. And you will be something again. Mara's fists tightened. I'd rather be forgotten than be your prisoner, she screamed. The shadows lunged. She didn't run. She didn't break. She stood her ground as the pain of her past crashed over her like a tidal wave. Rejection letters. The bitterness of every lost opportunity. The suffocating silence after her boyfriend left. The nights she spent drowning in loneliness, convinced the world had moved on without her. It all surged forward, demanding to be faced. And she faced it. She saw the woman who had survived it. Not just a victim of her failures, but someone who had kept writing even when no one listened. She hadn't needed the bracelet to make her great. She had never needed it. Mara screamed, lifting her foot, and stomped on the bracelet. The jewel shattered. Light burst outward, the room bathed in a final, dying glow. The shadows froze. Then one by one they dissolved, silent, defeated, erased. The whispers ceased. The apartment fell still. Mara collapsed to her knees, body heaving, lungs burning. For the first time in years, her thoughts were her own. The bracelet's shattered pieces lay scattered before her, lifeless. The nightmare was over. Mara collapsed to her knees, her chest heaving as the shattered remnants of the bracelet lay scattered across the floor. The crimson glow was gone, replaced by the flickering, almost fragile light of her bedside lamp. The room, once alive with whispers and shifting shadows, was now suffocatingly still. Just silence. But the damage was done. Her hands trembled as she reached for the edge of the bed, steadying herself. The muscles in her arms ached, her entire body felt hollowed out, like something had been carved from within her. Then she saw her reflection. Mara turned slowly toward the mirror, dreading what she would find. The woman who stared back was unrecognizable. Her hair, streaked with silver, hung limply over a gaunt face. The deep circles beneath her dull, hollow eyes spoke of sleepless nights she could never get back. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, as if the bracelet had drained the life out of her and left her an empty shell. Her fingers, weak and trembling, rose to touch her face. The faint lines around her mouth, the deepened creases on her forehead, had they been there before? Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over, tracing cold paths down her cheeks. It's over. The words barely made it past her lips, her voice hoarse, hollow. But as soon as she said them, she realized they didn't feel true. The nightmares were gone, yes. The whispers had been silenced. But the scars, both seen and unseen, remained. The weight of it all settled on her like a heavy cloak. The time she had lost, the price she had paid. It was over, but she was not the same. Mara didn't leave her apartment for 2 days. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the cracks forming into shapes she didn't bother to decipher, trying to piece herself back together. When she finally stepped outside, the cold morning air hit her like a slap, sharp, unforgiving. She pulled her coat tighter, bracing against the world as she took her first tentative steps onto the icy pavement. Everything felt different now, quieter, heavier, but somehow clearer. She was free, but the cost had left her hollow. She wandered through the park, her boots crunching softly against the frost-covered grass. The memories stalked her. The shadows, the whispers, the endless, relentless pull of the bracelet's promise. Her thoughts spiraled, unraveling the horror she had endured, the choices she had made, the darkness she had let in. She didn't see the raised tree root until it was too late. Her foot caught, her body lurched forward, and she hit the frozen ground with a hard, breath-stealing thud. Pain shot through her knee, sharp and insistent. She gritted her teeth, bracing herself to stand. And then she saw it. Nestled beneath the roots of the tree, half buried beneath frost and dead leaves, something glinted faintly in the pale morning light. Mara's breath caught. The bracelet. The same bracelet. Its jewel, once shattered, was whole again. A faint, pulsing crimson glow throbbed from within it, slow and patient, like the heartbeat of something waiting. Mara froze, her blood turning to ice. This wasn't possible. She had destroyed it. She had watched it break, had felt its power collapse into nothingness. But there it was, pristine, malevolent, unyielding. She stared, her pulse hammering, her fingers twitching just above the dirt. The warmth of the bracelet radiated up, almost imperceptibly, reaching for her, inviting her. For a moment, a brief, fleeting moment, she felt it call to her. A whisper, a promise, "Put me on." Mara's chest tightened. But before she could react, a sharp gust of wind swept through the park, stirring the leaves into a sudden, violent flurry. The bracelet was buried again, swallowed beneath the frost and debris, its glow vanishing. Hidden, waiting. Mara staggered back, breath shaky, knees weak. She didn't dare look at the spot again. She couldn't. She turned and limped away, each step dragging her farther from the place where she had been tempted once more. Deep down she knew. The bracelet wasn't done. It never would be. Mara sat on a park bench, her knee throbbing, her thoughts adrift. A shadow fell over her. She looked up. Gareth. His hands were shoved deep into the pockets of his coat, his dark hair damp from the cold mist. His face was as unreadable as ever. He didn't say anything at first. He just sat beside her, silent as the wind curled around them like ghosts. Finally, Gareth spoke, his voice low. "You destroyed it." A statement, but there was uncertainty in his tone. Mara exhaled, gaze fixed on the horizon. "I thought I did," she murmured. She pulled her coat tighter, as if the chill wasn't just in the air but inside her bones. "But it's still out there. I saw it. It's waiting for someone else." Gareth sighed, shaking his head. "That's how it works," he said. "It can't be destroyed, only passed on. You're lucky it let you go." Mara let out a bitter, hollow laugh. "Lucky?" She turned to him, her expression sharp, raw. "Is that what this is? Because I don't feel lucky, Gareth. I feel empty." Gareth studied her, his storm-gray eyes searching hers. For the first time since they had met, there was something else in his gaze, something almost gentle. "You're alive," he said simply. "You fought it and won. That's more than most people can say." A hesitation. Then softer. "But you don't have to do this alone. Whatever comes next, I'll be here." Mara blinked, her throat tightening. His words sank in, slipping through the layers of numbness she had wrapped around herself. And for the first time in years, she felt something stir inside her. Something small, something fragile, but something real. Oh, it wasn't much, but it was enough. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she nodded, a faint, tired smile touching her lips. She wiped the tears from her cheeks, letting the cold wind carry away the weight of the past. Together, they sat in silence. The world was quiet, but deep inside Mara knew this was only the beginning.